Hey guys, so growing up, Thanksgiving was always a really big deal for my family, and my parents always hosted Thanksgiving. There were like 20 or 30 people every year at their house, and they're both amazing cooks. But my favorite part of Thanksgiving dinner was always my mom's apple pie. So even though I haven't been back to Connecticut for many years for Thanksgiving, I like to bring the tradition to my own home, and today I'm going to share with you guys my mom's apple pie recipe. I'm Meg, and I'm passionate about finding ways to make life with kids easier in the kitchen. So I'm actually wearing an apron today, which I don't think I've ever done on camera before, but it can be a messy recipe with a bunch of steps, so I'm playing it safe. This is an apple pie with a crumb topping, and here's kind of the order of operations. I make the crust and the crumb the night before. I slice up the apples sometime in the afternoon, and then I actually bake the pie once the turkey is out of the oven and we're all enjoying Thanksgiving dinner. It cools for about 30 minutes, and then we're ready to enjoy our apple pie. So here is what you're gonna need for this recipe. For the crust, you're gonna need flours and a pinch of salt, orange juice, cold cubed butter, and some frozen Crisco. So the first step is the crust, and I do think this is what's intimidating for most people to make a homemade crust. So you can buy one that's pre-made, but it does make it really special if you do it yourself. So I promise it's not as hard as it looks. You're gonna need a food processor. I've got my flour and my salt, which I'm gonna put right into the food processor. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn the food processor on and give it a quick whirl. The next step is to add my cold cube butter and my frozen Crisco, and that's the key, is that everything has to be really, really cold. So I'm just gonna start putting it on low and dropping these in. Now, you'll notice I do have a lot of butter and Crisco. The only healthy part of this recipe is the apples, but I promise you it's totally worth it. I'm looking for the mixture to resemble little peas. And next is my secret ingredient. I think this actually came from my dad's mom, my grandmother, and it's orange juice, and that's what's gonna help bind everything together. So I'm just gonna use as much as I need until the whole kind of dough comes together. All right, once my dough has come together, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it out into 2 pieces of wax paper. I'm gonna cut my dough in half. So this actually makes 2 pie crusts. So what I usually do is I make my pumpkin with one and my apple with the other, and flatten it down and get it into my fridge to chill. For the crumbs, you're gonna need flour, oats, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, salt, and then cold cubed butter. This is super simple. I'm using a food processor again for this, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dump my flour and my salt right into the food processor, as well as my oats. And then I've got some different seasonings. I'm using some cinnamon and nutmeg. You can add a little bit of ginger, some allspice if you want, but I really like to keep it pretty simple. So I'll get my nutmeg in there too. This smells so good, and I really love the crumb topping. This is like my favorite part. And then finally my brown sugar. And then I'm gonna get my top on here and just blend away a little bit. Now I'm gonna start by turning my food processor on low, keeping it running, and adding my cold cube butter until it looks like crumbs. Perfect, so you can see that it looks just like a crumb topping should. So I'm gonna turn it out, put it in my fridge, and get started with my filling. For the filling, you're going to need apples, sugar, flour, and cinnamon. So I've got my apples here. My mom always liked to use 1 green apple, and then she always used a variety of red apples. I think Macintosh are her favorite. In California, we really don't have as many options, so I try to use apples that aren't super crispy, so not Fuji's, Gala apples are okay, things like that. So the first step is to peel and then slice my apples. There are a lot of apples to peel and slice, and my mom always employed the whole family to help her do them. All right, so my apples peeled. I'm now gonna slice it. So I like to slice it really thinly so that it bakes a little bit quicker and gets nice and soft. My mom uses whole slices of the apples. A lot of people really like to do cubed apples in their pies. You can kind of experiment. There's no right answer. So I'm gonna continue peeling and slicing all my apples and putting them into a Ziploc bag. All right, so I'm putting my last apple into the bag, and then I'm gonna add the rest of my filling ingredients. So I have a little bit of sugar, just to make it nice and sweet. I've got some flour, and that helps thicken the filling up. And then I'm gonna put a little bit of cinnamon in for some extra flavor. And then I'm gonna zip it up and shake it up to mix all my filling. All right, so now we are actually ready to assemble our pie. All right, so my crust is out of the fridge, and here's the tricky part. This is the part that gives my mother a nervous breakdown. So what I need is a very clean work surface. And to that, I'm going to, sorry about that. To that, I'm gonna add a little bit of flour so that the dough doesn't stick to my surface. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit more flour and rub it on my rolling pin. Okay, now I've got my dough. I'm gonna put it right onto the flour, get a little bit on both sides, and it's time to roll. I'm kind of gonna start from the center and work my way out. I want it to be really even. Be very patient with this. It does take a little bit of time. You'll start to see cracks, don't worry about it. It can be a rustic tart. It really does not have to be perfect. Okay, so when I think it's about the size of my pan, I'm using a deep dish pan, so I definitely need it very big. Just kind of put my pan on there and measure it. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of try to flip the pie crust right into the pie. Some people fold it in half. You know, I just try to do the best I can. Again, I'm using a spatula just to make sure it's not sticking to the counter. All right, in the moment of truth, so I'm gently laying my pie pan right down on there. And I'm just kind of lifting the crust into it and flipping. Perfect. So you'll see that I have a little bit of extra right here, and I'm just gonna go back and work that right back into the crust. So once I put Humpty Dumpty back together again, I'm gonna actually crimp the edges, which just means pinching them together, and it just kind of gives it a pretty look and makes sure that there's nothing that's too thin hanging over the edges. So everything's crimped, it's time for my apple filling to go right into the center. Every last apple must go in because they are so delicious. Then I'm gonna spread it out really evenly. Now for the crumbs. This recipe makes a lot of crumbs, but I like to use as many of them as possible, so I really just spread them all around. All right, so the last of my crumbs, now let's get it in the oven. My oven's been preheated to 375 degrees. I'm gonna put a baking sheet on the bottom rack of my oven and my pie on top of the baking sheet and bake it for about 1 hour. You know it's done when you can see some of the apple juices bubbling and caramelizing. Let it cool for at least 30 minutes before you dig in. All right, you guys, the pie is out of the oven. It looks so good, it smells so good, and it is taking a lot of willpower not to eat it right now. So I guess I'll have to have some people over this weekend to help me eat it. Is it good? So I hope I did my mom's apple pie recipe justice today. It really is the most delicious pie I've ever had. I'm sure you guys have some of your own family traditional recipes for Thanksgiving, so share them in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.